Welcome to today's webinar, Smart Schematic Trend, Are They Worth the Change? I am your presenter, Charles Mayu. I am the Product Technical Manager here at Hawk Ridge Systems for our electrical design suites. That includes SOLIDWORKS Electrical and SOLIDWORKS PCB. So today we are going to be taking a look at SOLIDWORKS Electrical, and where that falls under is on our product tree here, or our product card, is the SOLIDWORKS electrical schematic. And we're mostly going to focus on the schematic capture today, but there is also a 3D side of that. And this is our complete line of products that we do cover or carry, from our design to manage to simulate to actual manufacturing, as far as digital manufacturing with 3D printers and stuff like that. So you can see all the different products that we do offer there. So kind of give you guys an idea of what we're going to go over today. So we're going to talk about the shortfalls of current processes using traditional 2D drafting tools, i.e. DraftSight, AutoCAD, that type of stuff, right? And then we're going to take a look at the faster schematic creation with fewer errors, what SOLIDWORKS Electrical can do for you, and then also look at easy data reuse and new content setup, right? So how to quickly reuse existing data and how to set up new stuff on the fly. And then we'll look at some professional, accurate final documentation, get all of that laid out for you. And then we'll wrap up with some wrap up of everything, and then a Q&A session there at the end. Now, like always, if you do have questions as far as what's being displayed or what's being discussed, I do have one of my colleagues on the webinar with me watching out or taking care of those questions. Saran Haldar, he's one of our senior applications engineers that also helps out with our SOLIDWORKS Electrical and does a lot of the implementations with that for us also. So he's a great resource there for you. So you can ask questions during the webinar. If we have some good questions, we'll definitely address those at the end and get those questions and answers out for everyone to see. All right, so kind of give you guys a review of or a preview of what I'm going to get to. I'm basically going to draw a schematic from scratch in about 40 minutes here, right? So I'm going to have it create, 3 drawings. Basically, I'm going to draw and fill in 3 drawings, but I'm in total going to have it produce 3 automatic drawings, 9 report drawings. You can see all the different data that's going to be produced there in all about 40 minutes, okay? So that's actual drawing time, not necessarily counting what I'm going to be showing with the PowerPoint, but just within the application. So just kind of give you guys a preview of what's to come. Right, so let's take a look at shortfalls of traditional 2D drafting tools, right? So typically if you're drawing stuff out, it's just text and lines. You got time-consuming searching for symbols or copying and pasting symbols. And you're going to manually entry of component information, component details, the tags for those devices, the wire numbers are going to be all manual. Any of your reports are going to be done in a third software, Excel, spreadsheets, Google Sheets, anything like that, right? And then typically you don't have design rule checks, right? So you're not going to have the ability to check to make sure your designs are meeting specific criteria. And then you're going to spend a lot of extra time checking those errors, right? You can have this second person read and watch all that type of stuff and look through everything, right? So, and then making changes, right? So if you need to make changes, you got a labor-intensive design changes, right? You got to go through, touch every drawing, update everything, update all those manual entries just to make some simple changes sometimes. So those are some of the shortcomings of a traditional 2D drafting tool. And what we're going to take a look at is how can SOLIDWORKS Electrical change that using smart schematics, right? So let's take a look at faster creation with fewer errors, right? So what we're going to take a look at is some intelligent drawing tools, predefined wire styles with color and line types, automatic trimming of wires, that type of stuff, right? Things that you normally would have to do manually inside of your DraftSight or your AutoCAD, right? You'd have to drop your lines in, change your layers, change your line colors, change your line styles, all that type of stuff. Do your manually trimming of those to make sure that it doesn't cross through your symbols, that type of stuff, right? And then we're going to take a look at searching for symbols, automatic device tagging a number, and then we'll take a look at our error checking. Now it does talk about automatic reporting right now, so I'll show you those and how it builds on the fly. So with that, let's actually jump over to SOLIDWORKS Electrical. and kind of give you guys an understanding, a base of what this tool is. Now, SOLIDWORKS Electrical is a database-driven tool, so in the background, I do have Microsoft SQL running, and you know, the installation manager does come with SQL Express, which handles up to about 5 simultaneous users, and that's 5 people using SOLIDWORKS Electrical at the exact same time, okay? So that handles about 95% of our customer base. They don't really have that many more people using it. All right, so when I work on this, it's more of a project-based philosophy. So I opened up this project, which just happens to be a project template that I started with. I've got 3 existing drawings in here inside of my template. So it's almost like starting with a SOLIDWORKS drawing template has three sheets already defined, right? So I've got the cover page defined here, I've got a power page, and I've got a controls page, right? So those are 3 pages out of the box that I have in this project template. Now, if we take a look at our cover page, we have some attributes on this title page, our title block, that are filled in automatically for us, very similar to custom properties inside of SOLIDWORKS. Okay, so if I come up to my project and go to my project properties, and the first thing I want to talk about is like the name. So if I come up here and change the name, right? So say SOLIDWORKS and type in Smart Schematics, right? And if I go ahead and click OK, it's going to update that under the project name on here. And that can go for any of these different fields that are in here. Plus, we have the ability to add 20 translatable data fields and 20 user data fields. So you can have up to 40 different customizable data entry fields to add to your project to display on your drawings. Plus, your individual properties of your individual drawings also have 20 and 20. So you've got a huge number of user data fields that you can use to help fill out information on these title blocks automatically for you. Okay, now the nice thing about it is that if I do have a field that's represented on multiple drawings, I update it inside the project properties, and it's going to go ahead and populate across all of them. All right, so I went ahead and brought up my power page here, and if you notice that I do have, like almost any other solid or any other Windows-based application at this time, is a command manager across the top, right? So it has the commonly used commands for the schematic application or schematic designs, right? So I'll go ahead and draw wires. Now I've got some wire styles already predefined inside of my project template. And this happens to be, I've got some, 18 gauge control, or I've got a, 24 volt. I also have some 3-phase 10 gauge wire here. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that. And what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and draw my bus down my left-hand side here, right? So I'm gonna start by drawing just down the left-hand side. Now, if I wanna reverse the phases, I can definitely do that. I can change that. I can draw with a bend. I can do some options there for it. And I'm just go ahead and left click once there. Now I have my repeat command turned on, so it keeps me inside the command even though I finished drawing that branch of wires. I'm gonna go ahead and draw a branch off of my bus here at row 6 and just drop that in there really quick. Now I added some extra wires here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and highlight those and delete those. I'm not gonna worry about those being too long. I'll deal with that later. And at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and start inserting components that represent, or symbols that represent devices that I need. Now I could come up and say insert symbol, which then would allow me to go search through my symbol library, find the components that I'm looking for based off classifications, right? I can come in here, look through the classifications. Now out of the box, we do have the typical default IEC and ANSI symbol sets for devices, such as circuit breakers, right? So we've got all the typical circuit breaker symbols there, contacts, typical, all of those typical ones there. Power supplies, we've got a lot of the typical power supplies in here also that you typically want to cross, switches, buttons and switches up here, right? So a bunch of different symbols out of the box there for you, fuse disconnectors, right? All that type of stuff is there for it. So instead of using my insert symbol command, I'm actually going to use my symbols palette over here on my right-hand side. Now this is very similar to my design library tab inside of SOLIDWORKS, right? I can come in here, I can search, I have some predefined groups here. If I wanted to, I can use out of those set of predefined ones, or I can actually search in here. I'm actually gonna come in here and search. I'm gonna type in disco. right? So I'm gonna look for anything with disco in the name, and happens that I found a bunch of them here, right? So I've got 2-pole fuse disconnector, single pole fuse disconnector, right? 3, 4. So I'm gonna grab the 4-pole fuse disconnector there, right? So we'll grab this one. Now, if I wanted to use this, I could just drag and drop it. Now I'm just left clicking and dragging it, and it would line up with my wires there, but really I want it on this branch, and it's not lining up too nicely, right? So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and double click on that, which opens up the insert symbol command, which is basically the same as this command up here. And I'm gonna go ahead, now the default orientation was that, right? So if I come over and highlight over my wires, it's going to try to snap into the correct orientation for those wires. Now this doesn't happen to be the correct orientation because I disconnect it. Technically I need it over here on my first wire to be on my ground over here. So what I'm gonna do is just right click to rotate around, right? So I can find the correct orientation that I'm looking for, and that looks like the correct orientation, so we'll drop that in there. Now it's gonna automatically name this for me, which happens to be 02F1, right? So we'll go ahead and click OK to that, and it's gonna drop that in there. Okay, so we've got that in there now, and it named it 02F1, which happens to be drawing 02 fuse first instance, right? All right, so we'll come back over here and we'll do a search for some more components, right? So 3-pole, and that's gonna give us all of our 3-pole devices. So we'll grab our 3-pole magnetothermal circuit breaker. Now this is in the correct orientation, so I can just drag and drop it and place it. Once again, gonna label it 02Q1, Q being the first circuit breaker, or Q for circuit breakers, and 1 for the first circuit breaker. Now, the circuit breaker naming of Q, that's just set up in my system. You can set it to be CB, however names you want it to define, that can be set there for it. Now, I want to point out, it automatically trimmed out those wires for me, right? And created that device and put it in there. Okay, so here's our contactor relay. We'll go ahead and grab that out and drag and drop that in place. Right, so we'll go ahead and click OK. Once again, 02K1, and then we'll go ahead and drop in a motor, right? So we'll go ahead and drop that in there. Okay, so then we've got our 3-phase motor here, so we'll drag and drop that out and place that here. And once again, 02M1, and we'll go ahead and get that going, right? So there we go, dropped all that in there. Now, before I go any further, I want to point out one of the things that we did talk about, and if you notice that did trim those wires, is our design rule checks. Now, because we do have it running on top of Microsoft SQL, when I placed these symbols that represented these components, it actually added circuit information for those components. And each one of those devices has different circuits, right? So these are fuse disconnector circuits, these are circuit breaker circuits, these are power contact circuits, and then that's motor circuits, right? So the system will also keep track of what components don't have a manufacturer's part that matches that circuit information, right? So here I've got a design rule check that says components missing manufacturer's parts, right? I've got one that says wires without marks. I didn't name my wires, right? So I didn't apply marks. I don't have any terminal strips, so I don't have anything that's empty. And also here's one that says, verify maximum section of component terminal is respected, right? So what that means basically is verify that according to the manufacturer spec, I don't have a wire that's too big for that component, right? And then same thing, sometimes the manufacturers will specify that you can only have so many number of wires per connection point on that device also, right? So you can check to make sure that that is also adhered to. And then if you run cables and give us the length of it, we can calculate potential voltage drop across those cables. So those are design rule checks and all of these are out of the box design rule checks. So when you get the application, you install it, they're all there. And if you notice, these are hyperlinks. So they do take me to where that device is, right? So this is showing me that these 4 devices have no manufacturer's part, right? So let's go ahead and take a look and add some devices or add some manufacturer's parts. So we'll start with our fuse disconnector here. So I'm just going to double click, go into the component properties, and then come to the manufacturer's parts and circuits. So this is what I was talking about. The symbol has 4 fuse disconnector circuits defined, right? And it tells me which symbol is represented it. And if I highlight it, it shows me that symbol down here in the corner. So what I can do is go ahead and come into my manufacturer's parts library and do a search. Now I'm going to search for some just generic parts that happen to be labeled SWST as the manufacturer. And if I do a search for that, it will bring up those devices, right? So SWST 4-pole fuse disconnector, we'll add that to this component. Now, this is a fuse disconnector, so technically I need some fuses to go into this fuse disconnector also, right? So I'm gonna come up here and use some Bussmann fuses. So I'll come up, say Bussmann, oh, not, there's Bussmann. And then the other thing I can do is come down under current rating, I can select which current am I looking for, right? So I'm not looking in a fuse disconnector, I need to look for an actual fuse, right? So we'll select fuses, come down for my current rating again, and give me everything that's a 20 amp fuse by Bussmann, and I only technically have one in my library. And this particular case, I need 4 of them, right? So I need 4 of those to build up that complete part, okay? So not only did I add the fuse disconnector, I added the fuses that go inside that fuse disconnector also here. So it builds up my full bill of material, right? So click OK. And speaking of bill of materials, our bill of materials are just another report in our application, right? And this is one of the other things I talked about being automatic reporting, so I don't have to go out to a third-party application, keep track of that in Excel or Google Sheets or anything like that, right? So I've got drawing lists, that's one of my reports. I've got bill of materials group by manufacturer, and you can see here those 2 parts that I added, right? So I've got the 02 mark here, and then I've got the manufacturer's part information there, the part number, description. Now it doesn't show manufacturer because this one is set to group the parts by manufacturer, so it'll create a little table for each manufacturer. But I also have list of wires by line style. So all of my from to lists will get produced here also. List of wires by destination and origin, right? Origin destination tags. List of wire tags. Now I didn't tag my wires yet, so I don't have anything there, but my components do get tags, right? So these will build up, and you'll see when they come back to them a little bit later, they'll populate even more information in them as we get going further and further. Now, one thing about this is my symbols have default attributes applied to them that gets pulled from the manufacturer's parts library, right? So the terminal designators are defined there. That stuff gets filled out there for it. And then, you know, it brought in the manufacturer and the part number, the amp rating, and then the size of the fuse that needs in there. Now, my manufacturer and part number, maybe I don't want those on my drawing. I can come in here and easily turn those off. So they just hide those attributes, so that way my customers don't see it when I produce a drawing for them, right? So I can easily do that type of stuff and just go ahead and place it like that, right? So we get that defined that way. And then we'll come to our circuit breaker. So I'm gonna go ahead and define these really quick and get the rest of these in here. And once again, I'm just gonna use some generic SWST parts here. These aren't actual manufacturer's parts, but they do have detail that you would see from a manufacturer's part. So SWST. Now this one, I gotta go up to the same base class because it's a contactor relay, not just a power contact. So I've got a relay coil, 4 normally open power contacts, and an additional normally open power contact. So we'll add that. Okay. And then we'll define our motor over here in search. Now I'm going to use a Leroy Sumner as the manufacturer for this one. So this is an actual manufacturer. And you can see I've got 68 of them in my library. So if I need to narrow this down a little bit further, I can use any of my search filters here, or I can type in the part number under reference here, right? So, or just a portion of my part number, LS112, search, and it's going to find that for me. And I'll grab my LS112 4P4 motor there, and we'll drop that in there and define that. Okay, now typically going from our contactor relay to our motor, we're not going to keep that in, you know, using wires. We're going to use a cable, but typically we don't wire cables directly up to our contactor relays just to make it easier for serviceability. So for that, I'm going to use terminals. So I'm going to insert a terminal block here. Now we've got several different symbols that represent terminals, right? So I'm just going to use a standard disconnectable one here and place that on my drawing. And then define the orientation, click OK to all terminals, and there we go. We've got our terminals defined in there. Now, we do have the ability to use a graphical editor for our terminal strips here. And what this can do is make it easy for me to assign the manufacturer's part for this component. And this time I'm going to use a library filter. I'm going to filter all of my terminals blocks down to what's in my demonstration library here. And I've got a Phoenix Contact one here we'll use. I'll add that. So add those 4 to that device, okay? Now, typically going to our motor, we'll use a cable. One thing I want to point out is that we do have location capabilities inside of our project. We can define those ahead of time. And I've got 2 locations. I've got the electrical enclosure, and then I've got a conveyors, which is the L2. And my motor technically is going to be out on my L2, not on my electrical enclosure. So I'm going to go ahead and change the location of that really quick. And I can do that via going to the component properties. I can come down to component and say change location. Makes it several ways of doing that. Define that as being on the conveyor. Now this does follow the IEC standard, where it will display the location if it's different than the drawing. So like L2 is displayed there versus L1, okay? And now I'm gonna go ahead and take these and define these wires as being part of a cable core. Now I don't have any cables here, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a search here. So I'm gonna go new cable. I'm gonna come in and search my library. Just like I would search for my manufacturer's parts, I can use characteristics of the cable that I'm looking for, such as I'm looking for, AWG standard, right? American Wire Gauge standard. I'm going to use 10 gauge, and then I need 4 conductors. There's all my 10 gauge 4 conductor wire. And I'm going to use this very last one here, which is a generic one. I'll add that to my project. And then I'm just going to associate the individual wire cores. So I've got black, red, blue, and green here, or black, red, blue, and then green, yellow. So I'll define all those as being those cables and associate those so that way they are connected up, right? So W1 black, W1 red, blue, and then dark green, yellow is what that's defined there as, okay? Now, so that's kind of our quick and easy way of doing stuff. And if we double check our design rule checks, we have nothing missing manufacturer's parts, right? So we'll go ahead and take a look. Jump back over to our PowerPoint here, right? So we did our intelligent drawing tools, right? So we grabbed our predefined wire style, drew those out, didn't have to go back and make any changes to those wires, didn't have to trim anything out. All right, so we rapidly searched for symbols and components, didn't have to fumble through too much. Automatically device tagged. I didn't do wire numbers. In fact, let's go ahead and since it does discuss that, let's do that really quick, right? So from our process here, I can just click number wires, and that's going to give me my wire numbers, right? So it followed formulas predefined for us, right? So everything's labeled out as L1, so the phase and then which wire number it is for that phase, okay? Quick and easy, right? So that's our automatic wire numbers. We talked about the automatic report and error checking, right? So we did take care of that. Okay, so what's next up? Let's look at easy data reuse and new content setup, okay? So what does that entail? All right, so I want 2 more motor circuits, right? So I could just simply highlight, right click. I'm gonna do copy with insertion point because it lets me select the point of where I wanna reinsert it and then paste, right? So if I do it's just a simple copy and paste and reline up my wires here and get that placed in there. By default, it automatically increments my tags, right? So 02 Q2 is what that incremented to. 02 K2 is what that incremented to. Kept my terminals within the same strip, but created new terminal blocks in there. Automatically incremented the wire or the cable information and the motor information automatically do that. So I can simply do a copy and paste. It works wonders for that. Now I'm going to Control Z that really quick just to clean it up. So undo that. Now there's one other way to do design reuse, and that's if, say, I want to always use this circuit the way it is. So this circuit breaker with this contactor relay, with these terminal blocks, with this cable and this motor, right? So what I can do is create what we call macros. Now these macros, I've got a couple of them already here, are more like an intelligent block. So I grab what I want or highlight what I want. All right, so I just use the reverse selection so it grabs the wires over here too. And then I just simply drag and drop this to my macros pane, right? So left click and hold, grab that wire, see how it drags it. Now if I bring this over and bring it over to my macros pane, you can see there's a little plus on my cursor there. I let go of my mouse button and it's automatically going to create that macro for me. And then I just go ahead and fill in the description, right? So LS112 motor, circuit, right? And define that, okay? Get that defined. Excuse me there. So there it created that macro. Now that macro is available for use in any other project, okay? So I can go ahead and drag and drop that macro in here and define that also, right? So to left click, drag it, let go. Now it's gonna give me the options for paste special. I'm just gonna go ahead and click finish, and it does the same thing as a typical paste, 02Q2, 02K2. Same terminal strip, increase the terminals, kept the cable number, and increase the motor, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and drag one more of those out here and get that defined here also, and drop that, define all of that. Now, I've added some more wires, so I'll come up and say number new wires again, and we'll go ahead and get those numbered out again, right? So it just continued with the wire numbering because I just added those, right? So it's gonna keep that continuing. Got the same incrementation of the cables, and there's all of our motors. Now, to make it clean and easier to see, I'm gonna go ahead and drop in a location outline around my motors to just, give a visual representation that, hey, these are in a different location. So I'm just gonna left click and drag around, say that's L2 conveyors, and just go ahead and update that. So that's saying that those motors are on my L2 conveyor, okay? Now I got one other component to get in here on my control or on my power page, and that is a power supply. Right now, I don't have it set up in my macros here, but I do have an insert macros command up here on my schematic tab. Now this will work for, say, someone else wants to use a macro that I created. This is how they would get to it, is by coming into the macros, insert macros, and then search the macros library. And I can go ahead and grab my 24-volt power supply here, right? So we'll select that, grab that, and we'll go ahead and get this connected up with our wires. Okay, so we'll drop that in there, click finish on that, and that defines that there for us. And once again, before we move on, we'll go ahead and number our wires, get those numbered out for us, okay? Now, you may not notice that there's no wire numbers being listed right here, and that's because we have what's called equipotential numbering turned on. So anything with the same technical voltage potential is going to be displayed as the same wire numbers, right? So L1-2 is the same as L1-2 down here. And that's just a setting within the application to show that information, okay? Now, if you're typically used to seeing other information here on your wires instead of just the wire number, we can show what we call our labels. So here's like an equipotential label, which has additional information for it. So the wire number, the gauge, and the color. And those are adjustable and customizable just like any other symbol, okay? Now I'm gonna make a little more extra space here. So I'm gonna come up to my schematic. I'm gonna use my stretch command here. And the stretch command works any stretch command for typical 2D drafting tool, right? So we're gonna stretch that out. And what I'm gonna do is simply drop in a symbol from my protection here. I'm gonna grab just a standard 2-pole circuit breaker. I'm gonna drag and drop that out here, place that there. And once again, it's gonna give it a tagging of 02Q4 because it's the 4th instance of a circuit breaker, and drop that in there. Now, at this point, I could go search my library for a 2-pole circuit breaker, but say I didn't find one I liked, or I knew it wasn't a part in my library yet. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a part on the fly here. Now, when I do part creation on the fly, things that I'm gonna need to insert are the reference or part number, right? So let's just go ahead and give it, something to define it, right? So we'll just give it a random number there. And then manufacturer, I'll use the existing SWST manufacturer, okay? And we'll come down, oop, I went past it, SWST. Now I use the drop down there to prevent me from doing any typos. Now, certainly I could type it in here if I wanted to, but I have seen typos pop up for people, so I encourage people to use the drop downs. Okay. Now, if I have my own internal part number, I can add that, right? So I can say like, this is HRS 1245, 12564 as a part number. And if I needed other information, I can add it. I can add data sheets here. I can fill in information for other stuff. Now, one of the things I might want to do is define a footprint symbol for this. What type of circuit breaker is it? It's a 2-pole circuit breaker. So I can just simply say, I'm going to select that one as a 2-pole circuit breaker to use. Okay. Other things I might want to insert, say current rating. I can say, okay, this is a 15 amp circuit breaker. If I knew the curve, the thermal settings, whatever that might be, I can define that also. Description, so 2-pole 15 amp, not 25, 15 amp. Circuit breaker, define that information. Once again, I got 20 user data fields that I can also use for this. Now, one other key important part of a component from our manufacturer's part is the circuits and terminal information, right? So here's my circuit breaker switch, right? So it's saying that that's the type of it is. Now it's 2-pole or 2 connection points for each one. So, right, so L1, T1, L2, T2. So that's how it's defined. And here I can type in maximum number of wires per connection point. Let's say it's 2. Or if I want to make something happen, I can say, it's only 1. And I'll show you guys how those work. Now, maximum wire gauge, I can say what's the maximum gauge it can handle. We'll say 10, all right? So I can put that in there, that's the maximum the manufacturer defines. And minimum, right? So I can say, okay, the minimum size is 14, right? So I can predefine that information and fill that information out for the manufacturer's parts. I also have it for millimeters squared there also. And I can define mnemonics also if I needed to. Now, if this part needed an additional wire termination type, maybe I typically use wire ferrules, or the manufacturer specifies that I need wire ferrules, I can define that here also, and I can get that into a report also. So I can say, it requires a ferrule. All right. Now, that's not going to add a manufacturer's parts to the library for me or anything like that, but I can use that as a way of checking stuff, right? So there it goes. There's my manufacturer's part. Doesn't exist. Do you want to add it? Yes, let's add it to my library. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click OK to that. And that quickly and easily added that circuit breaker to my manufacturer's part and defined it for this power supply, right? So I've got that there for me defined. And there's my power page as it is right now. So we'll jump over to our controls. And instead of you guys seeing me do a bunch of stuff in the controls, I'm just going to go ahead and use a macro, right? So I do have a macro that's a control page that's already defined. Let's see if I can see where I have it, or did I get rid of it? I've got a lot of macros here, so you can see I've got quite a few. You can do full pages. You can do all sorts of stuff to predefine all of that if you wanted to. Looks like I must have deleted it. Let's see if I have it there. Nope. So I don't have it anymore. So it looks like I got rid of it. That's okay. We'll do it really quick because it doesn't take too long. Right. So I'll come up, draw single wire, grab my 24 volt 18 gauge here. We'll select that. And I'm going to go 1 wire. I don't need 8 of them. So we'll just draw out our branch here and kind of do a simple ladder like so, and just get some components across as we see that we want them, right? Now I didn't get that wire long enough, but I can simply fix that by clicking on that and moving that. Now we're going to go ahead and drop in some more components again. So we'll come to our commands, and what we'll do is just go ahead and get a few of these down. I'm going to start with the start button. I'm going to drop that down here, click OK, and we will get our e-stop. We'll put that up here, okay, and then our indicator light there. Normally open contact we'll put up here, and then we will also put a relay coil over here, okay. So we've got all those defined. And if we take a look again at our design rule checks, we'll see we've got all those parts that we just dropped in that don't have manufacturer's parts, right? So we dropped in those components that represent those and no manufacturer's parts. So we'll go ahead and get those assigned here really quick. Start with our start button, or normally closed. Oh, actually, I grabbed the wrong button, didn't I? I grabbed the wrong symbol. We'll delete, actually I'll show you that, just a quick fix to that. I can come in here and say symbol and say replace, and I can change this to push button normally open. Actually, I'll grab not that one because that one's got some extra stuff. We'll grab that and define that. Now we'll come into manufacturer's parts and circuits and search. That would have been bad. I would have grabbed not been able to attach the right wire, but you guys can see I quickly made that fix just by noticing that, hey, I grabbed the wrong part there and fixed that. Now, if you guys notice that on that one, it did have, let me go back into the manufacturer's parts on this S1. It does have the signaling alarm there, right? So that's our light that is over here, okay? In fact, we'll fix that really quick. I'll say assign component and say that is part of my S1 switch instead, right? So same thing with our relay coil. We'll highlight that and say that's part of our 02K2, right? So when I do that, it brings in this additional information, which is our cross-reference to the contact sets that is controlling, and see if 13 and 14 are available. So I can come over and say, you know, grab that, make that 02K1 also. Nope, I did that as 02K2. Did the wrong one on this one. Assign component 02K1. All right, there we go. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so we've got those defined there, and we'll just go ahead and close out of this command. And if we needed to, we can move this over a little bit, get a little space there. But really what I should do is come back up to my schematic, use the stretch command again, and move this stuff over. Now this wire didn't move with it, that's okay. We'll just go ahead and manually move that over. All right, so I can get things cleaned up, move things around, get it looking nice and neat. Now coming out of our contact relay and our light, we need to change our wire style. So we'll get that changed really quick. Wire style, we'll do a replace on that. We'll say to the echo potential, check mark that, and then come in and say that's going to be part of our ground wire there. And that gets changed over really quick for us, okay? And then last thing I need to do is, or next thing I need to do is create the off-page designators and connect those wires up between our power supply and that ladder there. So I'll go to our origin destination manager and we'll go ahead and insert those. Now, the nice thing is it will only let me select wires that aren't connected to anything, and it will only let me connect up wires that are of the same wire style. So it helps keep and prevent cross connections between pages. Now, those are hyperlinks. So as I click on them, they do link between the two, right? And it does stay attached to the wire. So if I move this up, right? So now that's in row 1. Go take a look at, now it says 031, drawing 03. Row 1 is what that's connected to, right? So if we take and change this one also, that would fix that also, okay? Now I've got a couple other macros to insert here. One of them is going to be a basic PLC controller here. I'll drag and drop this in here and place this. Actually, before I place that, let's go ahead and insert my pneumatics first, because that one's a little tighter of a view here. So we'll drop that in right here, finish that, and then we'll insert our PLC that controls those pneumatics, right? Just to make it a little easier for me to insert and line up my wires here, right? So we've got that connected up and finished. And then I just need to connect these wires up to the outputs on the PLC, right? So Just get that all connected up. Okay. And then I may need additional information going to the PLC, such as a wire coming off of my start button to my input here. I'll just go ahead and drag and connect that up really quick there. And then I also need to connect up my ground wires, right? So one thing I want to point out is I didn't change my wire section. Let me show that before I draw that. Delete that really quick. Is I'm going to come in, draw a single wire. Now I'm not changing my wire style, but I'm just coming in and saying, you know, I'm going to come off of this wire. I'll come up, come across, connect up to this wire, right? So because I started from my ground wire, it automatically assumes that that's the wire style I wanted, okay? So just keep that in mind, that it would do all that type of stuff. Now, I may need additional information there. One thing I want to point out is if you don't have a symbol for a component, we do have the ability to insert black box symbols, right? So I can just come in and say, you know, drop in, you know, whatever this may be, right? This is a black box. I can say that's 01J1, and then I can come in and draw whatever, you know, say I need to draw something coming through this to create some inputs going to my PLC, right? So I can do that quickly and easily, create this type of inputs, right? Just drawing across it, tell it to create the black box and update it, and then it gives me those connection points for those devices, okay? So this could be some sort of sensor or whatever it might be. I don't really care what's inside of it. I just need to know what it connects up to, right? All right, so that's some additional component information there. Now I want to point out we can do hydraulics and pneumatics, right? So here's a pneumatic valve body controlling some pneumatic cylinders, and these valves are connected to those for cross-reference purposes, okay? All right, back to our PowerPoint here. Whoop, nope, not that one. I want this one, right? So we took a look at the easy data reuse and new content setup, right? So I did show the copy paste with the automatic marking. I also showed reusable circuit creation via macros. I showed adding a new symbol and components as you go. So using the black box to create new symbols, using those existing symbols to add components as you kind of go through. So it helps create information, right? So here's the macro and update black box here. Now I didn't talk about the circuit information too much for components, but I did show that you can create them from the manufacturer's part or from a symbol and add additional information for those, okay? All right. So let's take a look at our professional accurate final documentation, right? So things that we're going to look at are rapid changes in professional documentation, automatic creation and formatting of the reports, rapid handling of major changes due to documentation layout, and then look at our high quality outputs for our client's request, right? So let's take a look at that really quick here. So once again, here's all of our documentation that we have done. So we'll go to our project and we'll take a look at our reports, right? So we've got our drawing list, bill materials grouped by manufacturer, list of wires by line style. Now I didn't finish numbering all of my wires, so before I go any further, let's take care of that. Number new wires, take care of those, so that numbers everything that's on this drawing. All right, come back to our reports. And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna tell it to generate everything before the drawing lists. That way the drawing list has all the drawings on it. And I'm gonna tell it to generate drawings. Okay, so bill materials, list of wires, and drawing list is what I'm gonna have it create really quick. So there we go. Now this does take a little bit of time, but I'm not having to type anything in, right? So I'm not having to go to Excel. I'm not having to open up a web, open up Excel, open up Google Sheets, whatever it might be, open up some other third-party application and sit there and type in all that information, right? I'm not having to type out each part number, manufacturer, fill out the descriptions, fill out quantities, all that information I'm not having to do. And same thing with my wire lists, right? Okay, so we'll close that. We'll take a look at our bill materials group by manufacturer. So we've got that in here, listed out, right? So all that's grouped out by the manufacturers. We've got list of wires by line style, right? And then our drawing list, right? So there's a couple drawings that we have. Now, unfortunately, I've got a couple other drawings I want to produce, but before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and take my drawing list and move that up and get that in order here defined. And then also one of the things I need is a cabinet layout. right? So I'll come in here, do a cabinet layout. So I'll just do it for the electrical enclosure. So there's my drawing 12. I'm going to bring that up under my controls drawing and make that, put it there. Okay. And what I can do is start filling in my cabinet drawing, right? So now I've got all of my components and it shows me what needs to be inserted into my cabinet, but I don't have anything to put those in, right? So I need to add a cabinet. We'll come in here and I'm going to look for anything that's under Rittal, right? So if I search, I've got almost 3,000 parts under Rittal. So that's a lot to look through and browse through. But once again, I know a portion of the part number, so I can search and find that. There's the enclosure, and there happens to be the mounting plate also for that enclosure. So we'll grab both of those, drop in the enclosure. So that gives me the view of the enclosure. Now this is a scale drawing, so I can define that via scale. And I can insert the back plate also there. Now these are just symbols that represent those components, right? Now all of my components here are DIN rail mounted, so I'll go ahead and add a DIN rail here. Once again, I'm going to search via my demo library, and there's my Legrand 35 by 15 DIN rail, right? So I'll go ahead and grab that, and we'll add that to my project, and then we'll go ahead and define where this needs to be. Now I'm just using snap settings to define this, but if I wanted to and I knew what the length is, I could type that in here as also as 25, right? So this is a symbol. So in theory, I can do copy and paste, and that's going to drop in another symbol. And I can paste again, and that's going to drop in another symbol. But it also created an instance of that part for me. So if I look at my reports and go to my bill of materials and come in here, now it's not going to show up as a description because I don't have it here. But if we do look at it right there, there's the DIN rail. There's 3 of them, and there's 3 of them there, right? So it does add that information in there. Now, if I need wire ducts, I can do the same thing, add wire ducts, and come and look at my demo. Here's a 25 by 25 Legrand wire duct, so I'll add that. Add, okay. And then I can work the same way by inserting my wire ducts and defining those the same way, right? Control C, paste, and get those defined in here also, right? And then if I needed to, I can paste another one there, and I can change the orientation of this to get it for my top to bottom, right? So I can get that for the side here, right? Now that's too long, but I can come up here and use the update duct or rail, and that will allow me to update the length on that also, right? And then if I wanted to, I can use object snaps to move things around, right? Using my modify and the move command, I can say from there to get those lined up and get that in place, right? So we'll copy one more of those and we'll paste that over here. I'll just drop it there for now. And then once again, I'll use the move command to get it from that endpoint to there, right? So we got object snaps capability of there. And then I can go ahead and just insert components that I see that I need now, right? So there's the first one. And then we can insert all of our circuit breakers. Insert. Now, technically my 2-pole one, I'm going to move that and insert that first. And I can do spacing. So I can say, you know what, I need a 1/2-inch spacing here for my circuit breakers and drop that in there. And there's that. And then insert our power supply. We'll put that. Actually, let's move the power supply. Yeah, we'll put the power supply here. All right, so we can do all that. And I can hide already inserted components to help make it easier for me to see everything. And we'll get all of these components in here also. Drop in our PLC first, and then our contactor relays. And then our terminal strips, we'll insert those. Get both of these in there into both. That. And then last thing on here is our buttons and switches. All right, so we'll drop those in, start button and our eStop, right? So we'll get all that defined, right? And then if I needed to, inside the cabinet layout, I can add linear dimensions. I can do that type of stuff, right? So I can say, you know, from my object snap, you know, from here to there is that. I can define that. I can define, you know, from here to that component, right? So I can define that information to find out all that as I needed for, for my drawings, okay? So those are 2D cabinet layouts, right? There is one other form of drawing that we can get, and that is for our terminal strips. And those happen to be automatic terminal strip drawings, all right? So we'll go ahead and tell it to generate those also for us. Okay, and we'll say okay. And I had it do it just for our X1, but it did automatically create that for us, what's connected out to where, what it does connect up to. Okay, so that's another form of an automatic drawing for us. And I'm just moving these things around, right? So you noticed I've dragged and dropped a lot of my drawings around, and my drawing numbers got out of order, right? So here's one of the things that we can technically easily do is I can tell it to renumber my documents, tell it to recalculate all that, click OK, and it's going to go through, renumber those. So 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. But if you guys all remember, I'll touch on this one first. My origin destination was automatically updated with 04 instead of 03, but all my components do not update automatically. 02 Q4, 02 PS1, right? So those are all showing 02. Now, typically, if I did this inside of, you know, a 2D drafting tool, I would have to come in, double click on the text, change it manually, do all that type of stuff, right? Well, up here, I have the ability to renumber my marks and have the system do it for me automatically and tell it to recalculate everything. Okay, so it does recalculate that for me, all set up there. Now, one other thing I need to do is I need to renumber my wires, because this one does say 204, which happens to be drawing to row 4 is where it starts. So I need it to renumber my wires. I'll tell it to recalculate everything based off those also. So quickly and easily got all that stuff recalculated. Now, the last other thing I need to update is my drawings, because all my reports and everything else, because those do need to be updated. So I'll tell it to regenerate those drawings and have it fix all of those for us without having to manually fix and update every single instance of those across all of my reports. And then the last drawing that needs to be updated after this will be my terminal strip. Okay. So we'll click close and then close again, and then we will update the terminal strip drawing. Okay, so that's all updated. And then the last thing we want to do from this point in this perspective is export to PDF. So we'll go ahead and put this just on my desktop for now, make it quick, easily accessible. All right, so we'll just drop that in there and we'll go ahead and export that. Now it's going to ask me to update drawings. Now it does, because I just did all the updates, it automatically is there. So I'll continue without updating because it doesn't need it. All right, and there we go. And there's our PDF of our drawings. Now there's hyperlinks within the PDF will take us to the additional drawings. Now the components are also linked between everything that they're connected to. All right. Plus there is bookmarks within the PDF also for all the different symbols that represent those components. Okay. So all that is there available for those bookmarks, and hyperlinks are all available there. Just wanted to edit and comment on there, and I don't want it to. I'm inside of Adobe Reader or Acrobat Pro, so it does more than what it's supposed to. But you do have bookmarks of everything there. Okay. So once again, we took a look at, right, rapid changing, updating all of our terminal block information, high quality outputs in the standard formats for everyone, right? We renumbered wires, renumbered documents, all that type of stuff. And that is our professional, accurate final documentation, right? So let's take a look at our wrap up here. So some of the key benefits of the smart electrical schematic with SOLIDWORKS Electrical. We've got that fast schematic creation with fewer errors, right? We had the easy data reuse and new content setup. We did the rapid change management by updating our our marks for both our wires and all of our components. And then we also produced a professional, accurate final documentation with our PDF, right? So we had all that there. And if we take a look at some of the statistics from this, right? So we drew 3 drawings by ourselves, really, right? So we created our power page, our controls, and then we did a 2D cabinet layout. Those are the three drawings that we had to manually create. Now, drawings created automatically. Now, this one, it says 3. I only did 1, but I could have done all of my terminal blocks and had those all generated automatically for me. And then report pages created, right? So we had our cover page, our drawing list, and then all of our bill materials and the list of wires and component tags. All that stuff could be produced automatically, okay? And then intelligent data attributes displayed. We had roughly 2,000 of those and 904 unique fields, all that type of stuff, right? So total time, roughly 40 minutes, right? So count in the back and forth between the PowerPoint, we're right about that 40-minute mark, okay? Now at this point, we'll go ahead and take a little bit of a pause here and go with some questions. Now, I don't see any questions in the questions pane right now. Are there any questions out there? I know we're getting up to that 12 o'clock. We just hit the 12 o'clock hour, and I've got 2 slides left to discuss with you guys and 1 quick poll again. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the questions pane. And before I give you this, I'm going to ask if you guys do want any additional information or on SOLIDWORKS Electrical. Go ahead and let us know there really quickly if you could. If you do, a question would be is if there's a possible get a recording of this webinar. Yes, there will be a recording. Most likely will be published to our YouTube channel in the coming weeks, would be my guess. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. Got this poll up here. If you guys want to answer it, go for it. If you don't, that's fine with me. So I'm going to go ahead and close that really quick. And then additional information. So if you want to go out and find additional information on your own, you can definitely go to our webpage, right? So hawkridgesys.com and fill out that and get that in there, right? So if you go to there and then down to SOLIDWORKS and then electrical, and that's our SOLIDWORKS ECAD stuff. Now you can take a look at SOLIDWORKS Electrical and PCB there also. And then we do have additional tools for harnessing also available there you can check out. So additional information there. If you want, data sheet you can download from our webpage. And once again, that's hawkridgesys.com. And then just navigate through the SOLIDWORKS and then to the ECAD Electrical. And with that, I want to say thank you again. Go to our next page here. So thank you again for attending. Looks like we do have a couple other questions here. Can this create a cable drawing? If you're referring to like I need to get a drawing of a cable with ends on it, yes, you can do cable drawings too. It's a little bit of a workaround using cabinet layouts, but you can do that. Are parts searched added from the web or have to be added manually? You can do both. As Saran mentioned directly to you, Juan, you can download from the electrical content portal, which is an online catalog of manufacturers' parts. It's highly populated with industrial automation stuff from the big manufacturers such as Siemens, ABB, Rockwell Automation, Allen Bradley's part of Siemens, or part of Rockwell, I should say. Trying to think of the other big one out there. Omron. There's a lot of the big manufacturers are up there. But I wanted to thank everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your afternoon and the rest of your week. Thank you again.